the record with well over 102,000 here tomorrow afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Brian Williams. Welcome to Montreal. In the next 60 minutes, we'll take a look at highlights from qualifying held earlier today, and we will deal with the tobacco sponsorship issue in sport, in particular Formula One racing. Dr. Jonathan Palmer and John Watson will join me in just a minute. Right now, to set the stage for this weekend, let's recap this 1998 season. Look back 3 months to Melbourne and a fresh start for the 1998 season. Little did defending world champion Jacques Villeneuve realize how tough things would be. And for his main rival last year, Michael Schumacher, a new adversary to chase. It was the McLarens of Mika Hakkinen and David Coulthard at the front of the field after dominating qualifying. Now, Schumacher's day was short. A major engine blow-up on lap 5 puts him out. At the finish, though, in a controversial move, Coulthard lets Hakkinen pass for the victory because of a pre-race agreement. 3 weeks later in Rio, little had changed to curb the dominance of the McLarens. Once again, they start 1-2 in the grid with Hakkinen getting away cleanly with the lead, while Villeneuve, who qualified only 10th, was not competitive. We look at Villeneuve here, not competitive in Rio. Schumacher regained 3rd place with pit strategy. He took on slightly less fuel on his first stop and got out cleanly, quickly enough to emerge ahead of both Alexander Wurz and Ferrari teammate Eddie Irvine. The best move, though, comes here from Benetton's Wurz, taking the inside line to get past Heinz-Harald Frentzen. But the McLarens ran away from the rest again, Hakkinen making it 2 for 2 in Brazil. April in Argentina, and the prospects brightened for Schumacher despite a somewhat shaky start. By lap 4, back in second, Schumacher shoved Coulthard aside, taking over the lead. And Coulthard's confrontations were not done yet. Villeneuve, the victim of this collision, and the Williams car was out of the race. In the battle for 3rd place, with Villeneuve gone, Ferrari's Eddie Irvine held off the hard-charging Wurz to maintain a top 3 finish. Ferrari puts 2 on the podium. Career victory number 28 for Schumacher, a champagne shampoo for team director Jean Todt. In the end of April, hopes were high for Ferrari at Imola. Coulthard, though, was the pace setter, earning his 7th career pole, gets off to a quick, clean start. Now we see a rare sight, a McLaren breakdown. Hakkinen slows, Schumacher goes by, the flying Finn derailed by gearbox problems. Villeneuve was enjoying his best race of the season, climbing all the way to 4th place. Coulthard had Schumacher closing in on him, but managed to take the checkered flag. His 4th career win, 3 wins in 4 races for McLaren. On to Barcelona for the predictable McLaren sweep, 1-2 in the grid again. Hakkinen got the better of Coulthard in a lackluster race. Excitement came with a clash between Fisichella and Irvine, fighting for 3rd, each blaming the other for ending their day. Villeneuve was chasing Rubens Barrichello, but couldn't catch him, settling for 6th place. And Mika Hakkinen brought home victory number 3. Then it was May in Monaco, the streets of Monte Carlo, the classic on the most difficult circuit to pass. Hakkinen had the prime position safely in front of the roaring herd. 17 laps in, his teammate David Coulthard would blow his engine, approaching the chicane, and his race was all over. Benetton's Fisichella, who qualified 3rd, would keep Michael Schumacher at bay. Irvine, as usual, would not be giving ground, bumping Heinz-Harald Frentzen into the barrier. After a round of pit stops, Schumacher takes Wurz at the Lowe's hairpin. Briefly loses position, then regains the spot just prior to the tunnel, but his next stop was the pits, and he was out of contention. Later on, Wurz emerges from the tunnel, missing his front wing and a whole lot more. Fisichella, now 2nd and closing, had an adventure on lap 58. Fortunately, he recovers to take 2nd place. For Villeneuve, a top 6 finish, his 3rd straight. He picked up a pair of points for finishing 5th, and once again, Hakkinen was uncatchable. His 4th win of the year and a 17-point lead over David Coulthard atop the standings coming here to Montreal. And coming here to Montreal, a veteran of 84 Formula One races, 5 here in Montreal, an MD in London, England, Dr. Jonathan Palmer. Welcome back for a second year.
Thank you very much, Brian. Great to be with you.
It's good to have you back. Has this season been too predictable? Has it been boring?
Well, some may say that, but after that entry, we've just seen who possibly could. Sure, we've got McLaren back at the front now, and that hasn't happened for many years. But we know, too, from last year when Jacques Villeneuve spun away the lead so early on that what looks like the favourite can go very, very wrong. And, of course, the race is much more than what just happens at the front. Montreal's always close, and there'll be action, as we've seen, all the way down the field. Well,
it's a good course to race on and makes for tight racing. Speaking of veterans of Formula One, John Watson raced in 152 races. He won 5, drove here. He was 2nd, 3rd, and 6th in his last 3 appearances. He joins us in the pits.
Well, that seems an awfully long time ago, Brian, but nonetheless, very fond memories of this racetrack. And it's a racetrack that encourages overtaking. The nature of the circuit, a lot of slow corners, fast straights, great for braking, great for overtaking. We're going to see a little bit of that in qualifying this afternoon, but principally what we're going to see are 22 drivers out there driving the wheels off their car all the way down through the field, but particularly so at the front. And from what I've seen from Friday's running and this morning, Saturday morning, everybody is on the limit. There have been cars off the track, there's cars in the barrier. Mika Hakkinen yesterday was blinding. He was up against the barrier, leaving rubber down the side of those barriers. Michael Schumacher with the new Goodyear tire doing things unbelievable. Jordan, Ralph Schumacher, Michael's brother, he's found himself 5th quickest this morning as well. Great fill-up for the Jordan team. All across the field we're going to see stunning qualifying this afternoon, and of course that can only be good for Sunday's Grand Prix. Now who's going to be in pole position? Well, my money has to go with one of the 2 McLaren Mercedes drivers, be it Mika Hakkinen, who's the championship leader, or David Coulthard, 17 points behind. But don't dismiss Jacques Villeneuve and the Williams. They've made improvements, and Jacques is going to dig deep into his boots to try and please his home crowd. Michael Schumacher is the other Goodyear runner that's going to be close to the front. Whoever it is, it's going to be magic.
Thank you, John. Speaking of magic, one of the greats, Jackie Stewart, is up next, and we will deal with the tobacco sponsorship issue as we continue live from Montreal. And back in Montreal, still to come, highlights from qualifying held earlier today. Jackie Stewart talks about the tobacco sponsorship issue. Speaking of Jackie Stewart, I talked to Jackie earlier today. I said, look, McLaren's won 5 of 6 races. Do you find it boring? He said, Brian, when I was a driver and I was dominating, I found it exciting. Now I'm a team owner and I'm not winning. Yes, I find it boring. Stewart won in his first year as a driver. He is yet to win in this, his 2nd full season as a team owner.
We were ahead of expectations. Our 2nd place in Monaco was terrific. Our 3rd place in the grid here in Canada was, for us, maybe even in a funny sort of way, an even better performance. We had a lot of failures last year as a new team, but really we couldn't have asked for more than we got. The 2nd year is historically not a very good year in motor racing for any Grand Prix team. We felt that we had to put ourselves in shape for years 3, 4 and 5, particularly years 4 and 5. If we got our new technology broken in our 2nd year and the composite carbon fibre gearbox we thought was worthwhile, if we were going to do it, this was the right year to do it in for the future.
Well, I would love to get more points. I think we're reasonably happy with the car, with the way things are going. So Canada is a great place for me. So I really do expect to be on the points this weekend.
We've got the 2nd largest car company in the world behind us. We have the most successful financial services institution behind us. I'm not exactly penniless. The whole idea of us having to justify our financial resources for 1998 was for me really ridiculous, and I said so. I mean, there were other teams in there that I know that don't have this financial support that we have, or the liquidity that we have, so I'm afraid it was some sort of game. This is a racetrack where braking is vital. It's a very tough circuit on braking, as you well know, and there's one or two good passing areas. Our car this year has always braked well so far this year, so we'd like to think we could do quite well, but really all we're looking for is a top 10 qualifying position on the grid, ideally a top 10 finish. If we're in a top 10 finish and we finish the race, we have a chance of picking up the odd championship point, and we shouldn't ask for anything more than that at this early stage, keeping in mind we're only now into our 15th month of being a Grand Prix team.
More from my longtime broadcast partner Jackie Stewart in just a minute. Tomorrow afternoon when we come on the air at 12:30 Eastern, 9:30 on the West Coast, a sit-down interview with Jacques Villeneuve. He'll address issues such as Larry Walker saying he lost out to a machine when Villeneuve was named Athlete of the Year. Of course, Villeneuve's performance this year tends to maybe support that theory. He's standing only 6th. Even though he's 6th in the world driver standings, when he returns home, Jacques Villeneuve is definitely number 1.
Jacques Villeneuve.
My favorite driver is Jacques Villeneuve!
Well, I'm Canadian, and this is my hometown, basically, where I was born 10 miles away from here. There's not many Canadian at the international level, I guess. So yeah, the interest is very high, and you know, it's a great town. It's a great, the people are great, but for me it became very difficult to just go out in the street and walk around, basically.
Jacques Villeneuve. My favorite driver is definitely Jacques Villeneuve.
I think Jacques Villeneuve has brought a whole new dimension to Formula One racing. He's broadened the horizons of the sport. Not only is he world champion and a quick and fast driver with a fighting spirit, which we all appreciate, but he's also become a pop icon. I happen to know that he gets over 1,000 fan mail letters a week. And most of those letters, in fact 80% of them, are from females aged 12 to 24. So he's attracted this whole new audience to the sport. And I think the sport is grateful to him for it.
The Formula One World Champion of 1997, Jacques Villeneuve.
It was really strange because, you know, all I do is drive a race car, and I try to do my job well, and to have so many people, you know, just going crazy like that was really strange. But it was a great feeling, because normally I'm very, well, I was uncomfortable, but normally I hate these type of situations. But there it was different because the championship was accomplished, and it was almost as if the fans were, you know, saying thank you or giving something back, and a show of appreciation, and that was nice.
Jacques is #1. Jacques rules.
My father was always very Canadian, and my mother also, and we just grew up like that. And even though we grew up in Europe, it's always been a very strong feeling, a very strong attachment, and coming back here is great.
Another big story here this week, in addition, of course, to Jacques Villeneuve, is the fact that Federal Minister Alan Rock announced changes to the tobacco sponsorship legislation. We'll hear from Jacques and Jackie Stewart in just a minute. I spoke with Don Brown this morning, the chairman of Imperial Tobacco, and wondered if players would continue as a major sponsor of the Canadian Grand Prix.
Well, our position is that we will continue with our sponsorship commitments. What we really announced last year was that in the event there wasn't a change in the proposed amendments, or the proposed amendments were brought on, that we couldn't continue. This recent announcement allows us to continue on with sponsorships as we have been for another 2 years. Now it reverts over to our normal contractual relationships with sponsors, and they come in and out, wax and wane. But so we will continue on, no question.
Can you give me a dollar figure? You have the Players Development Series, you've got the Grand Prix. What are we talking about? Dollars a year from Imperial Tobacco to motor racing?
Well, all in, we're probably looking at something between $25 and $30 million a year. When you include the development program, the 2 Players Indy cars, the sponsorship of the Players Grand Prix of Canada and Trois Rivières Players Grand Prix. So, and all in, it's in excess of $25 million.
Well, many young drivers have come up through the Players program. Greg Moore's racing on the IndyCar circuit this weekend in Detroit. We'll see him at the Molson Indy in Toronto and Vancouver. And also Jacques Villeneuve. I spoke with Villeneuve about the loss of tobacco advertising earlier this week.
The high level, like F1, is already set up, and there's very little that could destroy it. It's just made it all around the world, wherever there's been those bans, destroyed the smaller series, basically. It's destroyed the areas where a young driver that's up and coming with talent, it's destroyed its chance. Because before you had a few teams with some help that could get drivers without having them to pay, where now you can't. Every driver has to pay now. The work of a young driver is almost more to find money than to be competitive, and that's sad. It's destroying sport in a way.
Normand Legault is the president of the Canadian Grand Prix. He's unavailable for comment today. His people did tell me, though, there will be meetings after this race. As far as they're concerned, it's the Players Canadian Grand Prix this weekend. There will be meetings next week. They've had discussions with other companies. I said, is Air Canada a possibility as a major sponsor? They said, look, there's no shortage of companies. Air Canada, as of right now, is just a rumor. We heard from Jackie Stewart. Jackie Stewart has no tobacco sponsorship. He told me this morning, it's not because I'm a moralist, it's because my major sponsors, i.e. Ford and Hewlett-Packard, are non-smoking companies, and I did it out of respect to those corporations. I asked my former broadcast partner and 3-time world champion Jackie Stewart if Formula One racing can survive without tobacco sponsorship, in as much as tobacco companies pump $400 million a year into Formula One racing.
Oh, I think nothing's irreplaceable, and you have to cut your cloth to suit your pocket. And therefore, some of the very big teams that are spending incredible sums of money, most of those incredible sums are coming from the cigarette companies. And they certainly at the moment have an advantage over the teams that do not have tobacco backing, simply because that money is not available to the normal commercial avenues of affordability. So there will be a loss if the tobacco companies are no longer able to participate. But in Formula One, the global coverage is so big, either through television such as yours or print media, that they will find other opportunities to still be well financed. The cigarette companies, of course, have invested a lot in young drivers to bring them along through the formative classes of the sport, and that may affect them. But I think that everybody's just got to look at life and do business in a new way, if that does come around. The tobacco companies, Brian, have done a lot for motorsports and sports in general in the world. And I'm not doing this in a moral stance. This isn't something that Jackie Stewart particularly has chosen to do.
Always willing to take a stand, always colorful, always willing to look to the future. Some refreshing opinions from one of the great spokesmen for this sport, Jackie Stewart. Stay with us. Lots more to come. We'll return to Montreal qualifying from earlier today. Still to come. Just about 5:25 on a Saturday afternoon. We look live in downtown Montreal. The McLarens, the Williams, the Benettons, the Ferraris, the front-running teams of Formula One racing. What about the other teams? They show up for every race. The question is, where are they going and why?
It's obviously very tough. It's an incredibly difficult formula, but you'd expect that at the top of motor racing that it only gets harder the closer to the top you get.
And that is Pedro Diniz in the Arrows, the first retirement from the Argentine Grand Prix.
Well, I think you've just got to be more focused and dedicated than they are. You know, I don't think there's any great magic about any of it. It's just down to hard work and application, and I think you've just got to make sure you drive your team and keep them focused to deliver better performance in every single area, and by doing that then hopefully you get up into the top. you know, the car this morning's not too bad. It's in the top 10. So we'll see. But we'll struggle here compared to Monaco for sure.
In the last 6 months it was awful for everybody, I mean, for me, but also everybody in the team. But now it's behind us and we can start the development, we can start working well. It was an investment for the future. I think we had to do it. And you know, if I wanted to make a delay for moving the people or new gearbox or every kind of decision I made, so I think I would be in a bad shape for the next 3 years. So we were in a bad shape for 6 months and now we can start to work. To be honest, sometimes I feel frustrated, but it's not very often, because also with my experience and when you look at the telemetry, for example, and when you have the feedback from the drivers, I'm able to read the telemetry much easier than everybody else, also talking to the drivers. The big problem this year, the telemetry was not working well in the first part of the season, so I had a problem. But normally I don't feel very frustrated now. Being a team owner, you have to take care of almost all the people inside the team one by one. When you're a racing driver, you really think that you know that everybody is behind you, and you know, just ask what you want to change on the car, on the team, and then you go to the hotel and go play golf, and it's everybody takes care of you, and in my position I need to take care to the people now.
The team started off what I considered after the end of '97 in a very high position, mentally as well as everything else. There were a lot of rule changes at the time which affected every team, but Jordan was probably further disadvantaged by having to change the engine. We also changed the driver, so maybe on reflection perhaps I tried to change too many things and to try and make them better, but on reflection it's cost us dearly. That I am currently analysing every single aspect of the business that I've got. And that is from the drivers, which I've analysed, and I feel that I've given them the vote of confidence that in the current situation with the car that they've got, I think they're doing a very good job. So then following on from there, we are currently analysing, Gary Anderson is not here, who's the designer of all the Jordan cars. He's back on base with the wind tunnel performance game to try and see where we've lost out, where we're gaining, where we're not doing the right job.
Well, it's always a strain on the old motivation and a strain on the self-confidence and all those things. But that's what Formula One is all about, and that's the test. You know, you have to be able to be strong enough to keep pushing when things aren't going well and when things are not, you know, are tough and the car's not quick enough.
It's very competitive and very tough. We're expected to get points here on Sunday under normal circumstances, but we've had a couple of bad runs, and I don't know how long that's going to last for before it turns its tide. Yes, I would like to get some points here. We have an outside chance of getting points, but you know, with the domination of McLaren, you're really looking for 4 places out of the top 6, so difficult times.
All right, Jonathan, let's go back and look at qualifying from earlier today before a record crowd. Here's David Coulthard. Coulthard on a fast lap. Coulthard with 1 victory this year. It's in San Marino. I understand as we look at Coulthard now, Villeneuve is just coming out of the pits, but we remember Coulthard here last year. He drove so very well.
Yes, of course, this year the McLarens have been dominant. We know that. A combination of probably Formula One's best aerodynamicist, and look at that slide there from Coulthard. Adrian Newey joining the team, super powerful Mercedes-Benz engines, Bridgestone tyres, and 2 of the best drivers out there in this man, Coulthard and Hakkinen. It's a complete package, and that's why McLaren have been dominant this year. But let's just review qualifying. It's a 1-hour session, just 1 qualifying session in Formula One. The drivers are allowed 12 laps over that time. They're going to use probably 2 or 3 sets of tyres. We're going to be looking at the split time on the left-hand side, the 49.025. That's the time 1/3 of the way round. Schumacher had set the benchmark time, and the minus means that David Coulthard there is minus 0.4. That's just under half a second less than the time of benchmark Ralf Schumacher. That means Coulthard is going faster. That's what we'd expect. You're because so far Ralf Schumacher was the first one to go out. We're early in the session at this point. We can see the speeds, 318 kilometers per hour, nearly 200. But these cars are sliding more these days. Look at the grooves in the tyres. New part of the regulation for this year, and he's done it. That's 0.844 of a second faster than Ralf Schumacher, demoting Ralf Schumacher in the Jordan. And of course, we just heard about them down to second place. Coulthard is now fastest, but of course, these are early days.
And here's Villeneuve. Villeneuve with all kinds of trouble here yesterday, Jonathan. Hydraulic problems with the car. And right now, as he's on a fast lap, he is well behind not only Coulthard, but Ralf Schumacher.
Indeed, Williams the dominant team last year, but things change quickly in Formula One, and particularly when you get a rules changes, and that's what we've had this year, and Williams certainly have slipped back from their dominant position last year. Frustrations for Villeneuve and for Frentzen, and now they've tried to address those with a longer wheelbase version of the Williams, and that means simply the car is longer, the axles are further apart. Now the benefit of that, Jacques was telling me this afternoon, is really in the high-speed corners, and Montreal does not have a lot of high-speed corners, and therefore they believe that they will not reap the kind of benefits from that they will do perhaps some other circuits. So optimism, but not the level of optimism from Villeneuve to try and get right back to the front in pole position.
There's the hairpin at the east end of Notre Dame. Jonathan, as we look at the tires, we can see the grooves. They used to be smooth. For those that don't follow the sport, explain the thinking behind the change in the tires.
There's been a lot of pressure to stop the ever-increasing speeds in Formula One for safety reasons and for the benefit of the overtaking, benefit of the entertainment. Now you can reduce speeds really by reducing power, increasing weight, or reducing grip. That's the best way of doing it. And to keep the same, now let's look at this time. There we are, 4th place for Jacques Villeneuve there. This is the kind of level of performance we might expect, but to reduce the grip of the tyres, you can make the tyre compound harder so they grip less, or you can put in some grooves in the tyres, and that's what the FIA have determined should be part of this year's regulations. And the grooves themselves mean that the rubber has to be harder, and grip level has reduced as a result. The cars slide more as a result, and that's great for us because we can see the drivers more at work. Now there's Damon Hill. We know Ralf Schumacher's gone that 2nd place, 4th place, 20.5. Now Ralf Schumacher did a 19.6, so already Damon Hill 9/10 of a second away from his teammate, younger brother of Michael Schumacher. There's that time. Alesi, good result from him. Alesi in the Sauber car. Of course, Alesi had his first ever Grand Prix win here in a Ferrari a few years ago. Jacques Villeneuve slipped back there from 4th to 5th, down in 4th to 5th. And then we go down through the order. Takagi, the fastest Japanese driver, in fact, to come from some time in the Tyrrell team, and working back there. But back with Damon Hill. Let's take a look at this circuit now. Montreal, it's not a particularly grippy surface. It's a circuit that is relatively fast, but it's punctuated with the 2nd and particularly 3rd gear right-left corners. You need good brakes, you need a good turn-in, you need good traction. The hairpin, this is 2/3 of the way round. 2nd gear at about 60 miles an hour, 100 kilometers, up through the gearbox. 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. Now this next section is absolutely fantastic. Watch it carefully. They're now doing 250 kilometers over the brow, coming down nearly 320. What's he got? 315, 318 there for Damon Hill before they break for the last right-left chicane. Watch how close they get to the wall, and well off the track goes Damon Hill. Now what's he going to do? 18.8. He's got Ralf Schumacher on his 19.6. He's still not as quick, but he has moved up 1 place. He's now up into 4th position, and well, he's going to be a little frustrated with that. The drivers know what time they've done, their other time they've done. They've got these radio links, of course, and he will have seen his time being displayed on the dash. Look at the curve there that Mika Häkkinen is using. Now let's look back. Häkkinen now. Häkkinen has been on pole position 4 times this year. Coulthard just once. So this is the man we expect to take pole position. Lovely camera angle there. The Finnish driver had a great big accident at the end of 1995. Recovered superbly. He's inside minus 0.153. Just over 1/10 of a second faster than the benchmark. That's David Coulthard, but ahead of him is Michael Schumacher. And this was to become a real thorn in the side, I believe, for Mika Häkkinen. He's coming down to that through the right, through the left. Now, watch for the split time again, but he's got Schumacher ahead. Now, that is near enough to be a problem, but don't think Schumacher's going quickly. Schumacher has come out of the pits. He is getting ready for his fast lap. Now, Schumacher really should be moving to one side now and letting Häkkinen go by. Well, he's not doing it. Look at the gap increasing. Häkkinen has given up. Now, he's not going to be happy with that, because that was Häkkinen's flying lap. Schumacher was on a warm-up lap, and it would have been, I think, better etiquette for Schumacher to have moved out of the way, let Häkkinen have that clean line for that crucial lap. Häkkinen has wasted a chance, but now we're back with Michael Schumacher. This is what he was building up for, the fast lap. Now, the conditions here at Montreal are being a lot cooler than people imagined. The weather can be very variable. We've had 85 degrees last year, and just how hot the weather is very influential on the grip of the tyres. The hotter, generally, the more grip the tyres will have. The teams generally have gone for the softer of the two Goodyear tyres that they've got available to them, and the Bridgestone team similarly have 2 compounds of Bridgestone. So Schumacher is pretty much good as damn it on the same time as David Coulthard. Coulthard fastest, so Schumacher in the Ferrari looking good at the moment to potentially displace Coulthard from that fastest time. Look at that Ferrari jinking around through the right, the left, third gear, 750 horsepower, up through the gears now, and coming down towards that hairpin. This is where we saw him get in the way, no doubt about it, and he's inside, but it's a shrinking margin there. 6 thousandths of a second, beautiful sideways slide. That's the lovely thing we do get with these groove tyres. So it's all going to happen on the last third of the track now. This is the last crucial part.
Remember last year, Williams had every pole position coming to Montreal. Schumacher took the pole and won the race. Häkkinen and Coulthard have all the pole positions so far. Down through the start-finish area comes Michael Schumacher, and no, he remains second behind David Coulthard.
But he's not far away, and with the hardness of these tyres, they're having trouble getting real working temperature into them. It could be this lap. If he keeps going on this second lap, this could be the time when he goes faster and picks up that pace.
You're watching qualifying highlights from earlier today. We'll return to Montreal as we look at Michael Schumacher right after this. Back in Montreal with Dr. Jonathan Palmer and John Watson. I'm Brian Williams. Qualifying highlights. We just saw Michael Schumacher go second fastest to David Coulthard and ahead of his brother Ralph. This could be his final fast lap of the session as he's out now.
Well, not the session, but the second of his 2 fast laps, and yes, he's done it. 0.2 of a second faster. Now, this time, Schumacher, we're now 15 minutes through the 60-minute session. He's gone faster on his second flying lap. Now, on most circuits, you wouldn't do that because the tyres would have got beyond their prime by that stage. But because the conditions are cooler here at Montreal today, that hasn't been a factor, and in fact it's been the other way around. They needed the second lap for many of them to get more grip, get the heat in the tyres, get more grip out of them, and that's what Michael Schumacher's done there. So plenty of time yet for retaliation from Coulthard, retaliation from Häkkinen, and potentially anybody else. But let's make no mistake, whilst McLaren are the dominant team this year, Ferrari have improved the car. We can get a very good idea of that from the fact that Schumacher's teammate Eddie Irvine has gone a lot better this year than he has had last year. The Ferrari is better, but even so, I think it's still fair to say that the best driver in Formula One is Schumacher, and he's making fantastic use of the Ferrari.
Here's the young Italian, Jonathan, Giancarlo Fisichella. Again, Schumacher, the fastest lap this time out. He will come back in the session. Here's Fisichella, who's driven very well this year. His best finish, second at Monaco. He was second in Belgium in 1997. His best Montreal finish, he was third here in 1996. And Fisichella and this team really have put it together over the past couple of races, the Benetton team.
Yes, under new leadership now from David Richards, who headed up the Subaru Rally program. Benetton really have looked at this with a fresh start. They've got young blood in the car. Fisichella is not one of the established stars from the last 5 years, but he's a star of the future and of the present, one has to say. And he's teamed up with Alexander Wurz, the Austrian, who stepped in last year for Gerhard Berger when he was off sick for a few Grand Prix, and both of these guys have really shown what they can do. The engine in that Benetton is the same engine, the Renault engine called the Playlife, or named the Playlife, as in the Williams car, but whereas the Williams are on Goodyear tyres, Benetton have Bridgestone. Let's look at the result here. So, benchmark there, 18.6, and a fabulous time there, 19.2, third fastest. Then we know that we've got David Coulthard so far with the fastest, I beg your pardon, Coulthard already got beaten there by Schumacher, and Fisichella in third. Now, he may well do another lap as well. Look at the way they use the curves here. Every inch of the track, every centimetre you've got to use, and you can also use the curves to help the car's handling. You can see above, Dave, look at it there. See how, now that's one of the Salvers, that's John Alesi, we're riding with him now. He's been around the hairpin. This is coming up now into turn 3, into the right-hander, through to the left, powering out here. Now this next section is absolutely flat out, up through the gears, round the left, and then look for the fast, right down to second gear, right round that hairpin, that's the shell hairpin, punching up through the gear. Let's just ride with him. Just feel as he accelerates up through 200, 250, absolutely flat out, over the brow, 290, 300, 320. Now he brakes right down. Do you know they can lose 70 miles an hour, 120 kilometers in just 1 second? And then past the start-finish line, Alesi and Salva really going pretty well this weekend.
Jean Alesi has just gone 5th fastest. That drops Jacques Villeneuve to 7th place. Jean Alesi won here in Montreal for Ferrari back in 1995, his sole Formula One victory. So Michael Schumacher still with the fastest time, and back out for Frank Williams is Villeneuve. Time in the left, the time to beat belongs to Schumacher. Remember, this is a pretty good story here, Jonathan, that Mika Hakkinen at this point had not turned in a fast lap as he was angry with Schumacher and went back in the pit. So, you know, Hakkinen and Coulthard both waiting to come out.
Yes, I think that certainly seemed it from the post-qualifying conference. 7th place of Villeneuve. He's going to be disappointed with that one. He's looking for better, 19.7. That puts him, well, just over a second away at this stage from Michael Schumacher. He's still setting the time. Let's look. Oh, he's on his second lap now. The 22.8 on the left-hand side. That's the time. 1/3 of the way round. And gosh, what a slide there. On top of the car. Let's just check that set to time. We should be coming up. Well, he's 0.4, nearly half a second away. And that's after just 1/3 of the circuit. This is not going to be, at the moment, a particularly good time for Villeneuve, unless he can really claw it back on the second and thirds of the lap. On top of the car, the air entry, and he's trying hard. Locking wheels, ABS braking is banned from Formula One, has been for some time, so it's all about getting the brake pedal right, the pressure, and he's Villeneuve there. Coming around, he's backed off. This is not going to be a lap. He's aborted it. The sensible thing to do. Just take a look at that car, and above Villeneuve's head is the big air inlet. We can see it as well on the
here's David Coulthard.
And above that air inlet, above their heads, that big T-bar is the camera. It's 1 point forward and 1 point back, and that's what gives us these fabulous views. So we've got Schumacher now fastest. Coulthard, can he do anything about it? The start of his first flying lap. There we are, right on the curbs on the inside. Now getting so far over on the curb just helps the car, helps tug it into the inside. If you run wide of that, you just can't get through that turn as quickly. Turn 3 there, turn 4. Flat out, up through the gears. That was a really fast right-hander. This is where Tanis went off last year on that right-hand part before this corner when he broke his legs in last year's Grand Prix that stopped the race. He's inside. Coulthard on line to get back ahead of Michael Schumacher, but they're only hundredths of a second in it at the 1/3 away point. McLaren immensely stable.
David Coulthard switched to McLaren in 1996. His first Formula One victory was 95 in Portugal for Frank Williams, and he's ahead by 1/100th of a second.
And again, you can see the oversteer there. The back comes out as that 780 horsepower, maybe even close to 800 horsepower gets put down. Last final straight. Look at that speed. He's coming up. He's got to beat 18.6, and we're now some 25 minutes into the program. Look how close he runs.
That's
to that
where
right-hand
Villeneuve hit the wall right there last year. Here comes Coulthard. And he still is behind Michael Schumacher.
But is he going to stay out and do another hard lap?
It looks like he's on another fast lap as we take a look at the standings for the top 6.
Well, we've talked about this before. They need to keep on it. They need this second lap. Bang, left over the curves. Right. Up through the gears again. Fingertip gear changing with their paddle controls. More temperature in the tyres this lap, more grip. We should see a better split time. We're looking for a minus here. Are we going to get a minus on 48.366? If we do, he's on target to get back to the pole ahead of Michael Schumacher.
There's the minus. Now, as we heard the gear changes, you talked about fingertip changes. Explain just how they change gears. It's done on the steering wheel.
It is indeed. There's a little paddle switch behind the steering wheel. They pull the right-hand one to change up, the left-hand one to change down, keeping the foot flat on the gas. But 0.2 of a second minus is a big amount of minus. Unless David makes a mistake here, and he has not done, this lap must surely be faster. This must surely put Coulthard back to the front and displace Schumacher back to P2.
That's exactly what happens as David Coulthard has gone fastest, dropping Michael Schumacher down to the second position. Jacques Villeneuve is now standing 8th. And again, here's Giancarlo Fisichella driving the Benetton.
Fisichella was absolutely superb at the last Grand Prix at Monte Carlo, and that's the kind of place where, well, he's slower, 0.4, but again, this could be that first lap, you see. We don't expect, we've got to be realistic. We've got all the crowds there looking on. We've got to be realistic. It is unlikely that Fisichella is going to take pole position from Häkkinen and Coulthard anyway. It is very unlikely because his best qualifying position so far has been third place at Monaco, and that's a real driver's circuit. Unlikely to be quite the case here when balance of the car, when brakes and grip and power play a larger role. But let's have a look how he's going to go. Well, he's third. He's done well, because what's interesting there is that he was 0.4 of a second down at the 1/3 distance, and he maintained that deficit. It did not increase over the last 2/3 of the lap. He's a real star, this guy. This could be a world champion of the future. Well, there's no doubt about it. Benetton, I'm sure, wisely have got Fisichella tied in for another couple of years, I would think, in that contract.
The man that looks to be headed for the World Championship in 1998, as we look at Giancarlo Fisichella, is Finland's Mika Häkkinen, driving for Ron Dennis and McLaren. Now, Häkkinen has yet... Here he is. Here is Mika Häkkinen. Häkkinen will now put in 1 and maybe 2 fast laps as he goes after his young Scottish teammate David Coulthard. Take us around, Jonathan.
Right, turn 1, the left-hander. Turn 2, hugging the inside, punching up through the gears, absolutely flat. This is the fastest driving you're going to see. This is driving is faster now. The drivers are more on the limit than they're going to be in the race tomorrow, because qualifying is absolutely crucial. You've just got to get that one hot lap in. 0.067. He's a little bit off Coulthard on this lap, but so close that it could easily be made up on the next. We're about halfway around the circuit now. Up through the gears, banging hard on the brakes, pulling 5G under braking. Look at the black marks of the ground where the wheels have been locking up. Coming down now towards, look at the puff of dirt as it comes up there, down towards that hairpin. And Schumacher really clearly did upset Häkkinen. Well, he's still off. It looks he's a little bit more off than he was too. It looks unlikely that he's going to get it back on the last third, but that is what he's going to be trying to do as he punches up to 320 kilometers per hour. Well, it's 316.7. Who's quibbling about 3? Well, then maybe that's his time from before. Let's have a look if he sees it. Indeed, he's gone to nearly the magic 320. It's a beautiful clean lap from Häkkinen. He's right up against it. He's not sliding at all. This could yet do it. Is he going to take the pole from Coulthard? The answer is yes so far. 30 minutes time. He's just inside by 0.06 of a second.
You're watching qualifying for tomorrow's Players Grand Prix of Canada. And at this point, Mika Häkkinen standing first, his teammate Coulthard second, followed by Schumacher, Fisichella, Irvine, and Ralf Schumacher. Jacques Villeneuve was ninth. Back with highlights from earlier today, qualifying for the Canadian Grand Prix. At this point, Jonathan Palmer, Jacques Villeneuve was standing ninth. Mika Häkkinen was the fastest, followed by his teammate David Coulthard. At this point, there was roughly 10 minutes to go in this 60-minute session.
And real pressure for Villeneuve too, because you can see it, he's pushing that hard. Beautiful braking there, locking a wheel, but cadence braking, coming on and off the brake pedal, not to flat spot that tyre. He's really got to improve on that 9th place. You know, that's well down. His own teammate Frenson's ahead of that. He's up in 6th place. Villeneuve's there's nothing worse than being beaten by your teammate, particularly for Villeneuve on his home ground, back in 9th place. This is the crucial lap. He may have some more time, but you can never rely on that. Anything could happen. Into the last right-left chicane, right out to that concrete wall. He's got to get into the mid-19s. He's to go as well as he wants to get sort of position. Yes, he's done it, 6th place. That puts Villeneuve now up ahead of his own teammate, Heinz-Harald Frentzen. And quite frankly, I think 6th place is about as good as Jacques Villeneuve can expect to get from today's qualifying with the performance of the car.
Now again from earlier today, here is David Coulthard. At this point, There was about 2 minutes, minute and a half to go, and he was trailing his teammate. It looked like Mika Hakkinen had the pole position. Take us around Coulthard's last and very dramatic run.
He's 0.02 of a second behind, but this morning Hakkinen and Coulthard did identical times to the 1,000. Unbelievable. But there's something incredibly special about the last closing few minutes of a qualifying session. Coulthard knows this is his last lap, the last chance to get that coveted pole position. There are going to be hundreds only in it, at the most a tenth or two. Coulthard desperately wants it to be in the right direction. Through a few more seconds and he will know whether he takes his... He does! So for David Coulthard there, Coulthard taking his second pole position of the 1998 World Championship. Disappointment for Hakkinen. He's been on the pole 4 times so far. Elation for Coulthard, but the front row is McLaren Mercedes once again.
And that occurred with 34 seconds to go in the session. McLaren, then the Ferrari, then the Benetton, then there's Ralf Schumacher for Jordan. We saw Jacques Villeneuve, and now we look at the rest of the qualifier. Jean Alesi was strong early, but falls back. Jan Magnussen driving for Jackie Stewart. 22 cars will start here tomorrow, back in Montreal after this. And back live in Montreal at just about 6 o'clock on this Saturday afternoon. We saw highlights from qualifying earlier today. Now, the results were predictable, but unlike the season, this was pretty exciting.
Well, this was. I mean, we had just 0.07 of a second splitting those two McLarens. You know, Michael Schumacher was only a couple of tenths behind that. And historically, when it comes to the race, one has to say that Schumacher's strategy, his thought, his race approach is absolutely fantastic. And so, to my mind, there will be virtually nothing between those three tomorrow.
So you think it'll be a 3-car race, the two McLarens and Michael Schumacher?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think we may well see the McLarens pulling out to start with, but one should never, never underestimate Schumacher. It's going to be fraught. I mean, those McLarens have got no team orders. They are neck and neck. It could be either one of them. Pressure's going to be high. Mistakes could be made. The track is relatively slippery. These tyres are quite hard. There are a whole lot of things that could go wrong, but someone's going to get it right the whole way.
In 1 or 2 seconds, what kind of a chance does Jacques Villeneuve have?
I would think Jacques going to have a very hard job of doing anything better than maybe picking up a 3rd place. I could see that maybe a problem for Hakkinen or Coulthard, and a good solid race from Villeneuve, 3rd.
All right, we're on the air tomorrow afternoon at 12:30 Eastern, 9:30 Pacific. For Dr. Jonathan Palmer and John Watson, I'm Brian Williams. Good afternoon from Montreal.